Nassim Haramein, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Is this your first or second tour to Australia?
This is my first tour to Australia as a, presenter of the physics that I'm bringing. I've been to Australia before, but it was in the early times, in the 80s, when I was a ski instructor.
Uh-huh. And have you enjoyed your tour here?
It's been wonderful. So far it's been great people, great response, a lot of fun, meeting new people, meeting all the folks at Nexus magazine and all this stuff. It's been wonderful.
What brought you in your life around to this maths or sacred maths, sacred geometry?
I think that at the root of my inquisition about this, at the root of my, discovery is a deep sense of communion with nature. Observation of nature, keen observation of nature. And I was a professional skier. I was, a climber, a backcountry skier. I spent a lot of time in nature everywhere, and just this sense of communion with nature, and looking at snow crystals and looking at quartz crystal as you climb the rock, and looking at the leaves of a tree, the roots of the trees, looking at the way nature organized, start to give me very serious fundamental clue that some kind of geometry was at the root of all creation, and that it would be very important to find out what that geometry would be, because that would be the key to the creative forces of the universe. So I think that my connection with nature was really crucial.
But you're saying that you had to get up close and personal to realize that.
Yes, I think it starts with a feeling of belonging and a feeling of communion with nature, and then I think when you get into that state, into that zone, you start to become aware of more of the details that may pass you by otherwise, and maybe the shape of a leaf, or the shape of a tree, or the way light reflects on a wave over the lake, or things like that. If you slow yourself down enough, if you get into that meditative state and that communion state with the universe, these things starts to appear to you. And for many researchers, for many different thinkers over history, I think these moments occurred, and a whole understanding of the fundamental geometry of creation emerged. And I think that's why it's called sacred geometry. It's because it comes from a sacred sense of connection with the universe as a whole.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background? You have an unusual name for most people. It took me a little while to get my head around your name, and I hope I'm not being rude, but can you tell us a little bit about your family's backgrounds?
I have a very mixed background. I was born in Switzerland. My mother is Italian, and my father is Persian, from Iran, and they decided to give me a Persian name, Nassim Haramein, which has multiple interpretation. Nassim is usually a small wind or a breeze, I think of it as a little vortex, and Haramein can mean the double temple, or Mecca, or the sacred space. In Egyptian, it means the double pyramid. So I think it was quite suited to the research I'm doing. There was a middle part as well, Hajj ol Haramein, which was given to me because of my grandfather. It means has gone to Mecca, has gone to the temple, because my grandfather was a guide that brought people to the temple, to Mecca, at least once in their life.
It's interesting to mention Mecca because I've just seen some information that says that Mecca is exactly phi ratio from the South Pole to the North Pole.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that piece of data. I'd like to see that to confirm that, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's a very powerful place. You know, I think the religious structures that are at play there are actually demonstrating fundamental principles of creation, like these thousands of people producing this very large vortex orbiting this object in the middle, the Kaaba. And I think that actually this advanced technology that I hypothesized was here prior to our written history, this very powerful technology that may have eventually became the Ark of the Covenant, and that some of these technologies were in other places. I think one of the places where this technology was placed, at least later on, at Mecca, maybe deep inside that cube in the middle, you know, there's evidence for that, that there's a relationship between the Ark of the Covenant and Mecca, because in the Quran, Muhammad goes from Mecca to the Temple of Solomon, where the Ark of the Covenant is kept, and ascends from there. So there's some kind of link between, you know, some, you know, power at Mecca and a power at the Temple of Solomon, and this is actually why the Islamic fractions eventually took the Dome of the Rock, where they built this large structure to cover over the foundation stone, the stone where the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to have been held in the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. So these, in Israel. So these, you know, two sites actually link the history of the Jewish community with the Islamic community, and I wish that was understood better, because maybe we could avoid shooting at each other.
Thank you for that. My research tells me that originally the Kaaba was actually a Shivite temple, and what I've understood is that they circumambulate, creating the vortex, and then there's a window, crystalline window, where there's a stone object behind that window. And from what I understand is that the word Shiite has an apostrophe where there's a letter missing, and so the name for a worshipper of Shiva is a Shivite. So my research has connected that Islamic site back to the Vedic literatures, and I'd say then there must be another connection also with Jerusalem. However, I haven't discovered that yet.
I think there's a lot of connection between many of the ancient civilizations, and I think the connective link is that crystal, this crystal power that was given to man by sun gods. In so many different cultures around the world, you see this very specific creation myth, where the sun gods bring this power to humans, in commonly as well described as a crystal or some crystalline structure that has rainbows in it and all this. I think it's very significant. It's very close to what is being described in some of the theoretical physics I'm writing, where I'm showing that the universe makes these very specific boundary conditions, these very specific horizons, and that we could understand how that happens and then reproduce it in laboratory, and basically built a little sun in a crystal, or a large atom, and I think this is, it all comes together very beautifully when you start to understand what these people may have been dealing with.
From my understanding, your research says that that technology was once virtually freely available on the Earth, and for
Yes.
some reason, historic reason, we've lost that.
Right.
And so you're trying to re-establish that old technology. You're looking for the same.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, there's lots of evidence that we had such technology early on. You know, there's many different temples around the world that could not have been built with even the, you know, technological advancements we have today. And there's many ancient civilizations, as I was saying, that describes this technology, that describe where it came from and what it was able to do, which included gravitational fields and electromagnetic radiation and all sorts of things. And I think it's crucial at this time that we understand this, that we decode the codes and apply it to our advanced physics and mathematics and to technology to transform our world. I think it has the potential to liberate human beings, and I think that's why the sun gods give it to man.